Coming up today on Locked On Texas Tech, a bonus episode as it's Red Raider Hoops tip-off time. Tech and Northwestern State from United Supermarkets Arena. We're getting you ready for the matchup and getting you ready to hit the ground running as Tech opens up their non-conference schedule in year 2 under Mark Adams. Coming up next on Locked On Texas Tech.
You are Locked On Texas Tech, your daily podcast on the Texas Tech Red Raiders. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
We're going to start this thing off right.
Raider! Everything runs through Lubbock.
Glad to have you along for the ride on Locked On Texas Tech bonus episode with the only Chris Level. I'm Casey Cowan. Thanks for making us your first listen each day on the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day. And today, actually, Chris, Hoops Day, as Mark Adams and the Red Raiders are hitting the court at last, man. Northwestern State fitting the description of the first potential victim, and should be a wild ride to begin the season, right? As tonight begins that work in progress we've already touched on in a bonus episode looking at the roster last week.
Yeah, and you won a whole bunch of games in a row in the non-conference, and you obviously didn't lose a game at home last year at all. So there's kind of a standard here, and I think these new guys that are playing for you now starting to understand that. I think they're all excited about playing with a big-time home court advantage, and I think a lot of fans expected to be there for this opener. And it's a weird situation because you play this Northwestern State team out of Natchitoches, Louisiana, yet they've got a new coach named Corey Gibson, and they have essentially an entirely new roster as well. So if you're Texas Tech, we're all trying to learn your team because it's basically an entirely new team, and yet you really can't figure out what you're going to play against because the team you're about to play against is kind of an entirely new team. So you can't look back at Northwestern State last year because there's a new coach and a whole bunch of new players. So you don't know what they're going to do. You don't know how they're going to do it. Yeah, try this one on. There's a couple of interesting things about Northwestern State, and we'll talk some Red Raiders here in a second too, as far as but they have a 7'3", 300-pounder. Okay,
Whoa.
Try that one on. Yeah, you think he might be able to rebound? Let's see here. Yeah, I think he's a Missouri transfer. And then you've got a kid named Hale Emmanuel. You're going to go, who the heck is that? If you go look on YouTube or any of the viral places where there's videos, you will find this young man. The reason why is he's 6'6" and he's got one arm. And he will dunk. He will dunk it on you. He's got all kinds of highlight videos out there. He was offered by Memphis. He lost his arm when he was about 6 years old and just figured out a way to keep playing basketball. And he's really good at it. And he averaged 25 points and 11 boards in high school at a fairly high level high school last year. And so, if people are out there watching this, man, Google Hale Emmanuel, and you'll see what I'm talking about. But, so I'm kind of fascinated about that. But then Coach Gibson brought a bunch of his players from Missouri State with him. So, if anything, you're kind of scouting Missouri State to see kind of how they would match up against Texas Tech because there's 3 guards that he brought with him. But, yeah, I'm excited about watching a bunch of new kids kind of see what playing for Texas Tech and playing for Mark Adams is like for sure.
Are you expecting, before we get to the Red Raiders, what kind of environment tomorrow? Have tickets been flying, or what's that been like?
I think there's about 14,000 tickets that are out for this game. Now, again, it depends on how many of the students show up and how many of the people use the tickets. But they are expecting a pretty big crowd for the opener, and so I'm excited about that. I mean, people have just gotten to where this is kind of a social event. This is kind of the thing to do is be at these basketball games, and I think that's been a big reason why you haven't lost much at home in a good long while. So I expect the opening crowd to be a really good one, and you're back at home on Thursday night as well, and then the following Monday, and then you go to Maui for a week.
Yeah, and I know that hopefully Club Red will be on and popping and a big part of getting it going.
Yes.
We got to get warmed up. Everybody's got to get warmed up before we're in midseason form, but it starts this week. Okay, Chris, I'm going to ask you a question here as it relates to the Red Raiders. I would like to remove Kevin O'Banner from the possible answers. Let's assume that he does, fulfill the role that we need him to fulfill. But I'm wondering who else you might look at to say this guy needs to come on the quickest for Texas Tech to really hit the ground running in non-conference play.
I'm going to give you one name that's not actually my answer because I want to exclude him as well. But I want to make sure that I talk about him. And I think Davion Harmon is much like Kevin O'Banner. I think he's a known quantity. I think you know what you're going to get from him. I think he's kind of an alpha. He talks. He's a leader. I think he's experienced. I think he can get to the rim. He can shoot it. Mark Adams loves what he's seen from him on defense. I mean, this is a young man that's played in your building before in an opposing uniform playing for Oklahoma. So those are really the two guys that I think that's what you know what you're going to get, in my opinion, for the most part. Yeah. I think there's hope for Daniel Baccio, but I'm not going to answer him either because I think that. Well, I just think that you. I was hoping Baccio. Well, you need him to take this next step, but it's almost like he's kind of got this folk hero, following lately because his name has been talked about so much that at some point it's a bit unrealistic. Sure. But he's going to play, a lot more minutes, and if he can avoid fouling. And things like that, I think that he's got a chance to be really, really good. I'm just not expecting him to be all world right out of the gate. Yeah. The name that I would tell you that I think has really got a chance to turn you into a really, really good team, or you're just going to be kind of average. I mean, there's two guys that I'm going to give you my name is going to be Jalen Tyson, just because I think Jalen Tyson is arguably your most talented player. I think he's got size. He can get anywhere he wants to on the floor. I love his personality. I just think at times he gets a bit wild and he kind of can turn the ball over a bit too much, or he gets ahead of himself, or he thinks that, hey man, I can score every time I've got the ball in my hands. And I think if he'll kind of rein it in at times and grow and mature as a player, which he will, it's just going to take some time, but he's a guy though that if he figures some of this stuff out sooner than later, I think he's got a chance to be really, really good for you because there's nowhere on the offensive end where he can't get to and score for you. I mean, he's good around the rim. He's a 3-level scorer, basically. He can shoot it from distance. He's good inside the arc and around the rim and in transition. I mean, all those different things. And so I just think if he's really good, you have a chance to be really good. If he's not, or just kind of average or really inconsistent, I think it kind of limits it. I'm putting a lot on him, but that's just how I feel about him. I think he's got really that kind of range is what he can kind of turn your team into to something really good or just kind of average. But I don't know if I answered your question. But
who was the other guy you were debating?
Well, he's a true freshman, but Pop Isaacs is a guy that, and I just don't want to say that about a true freshman because the last time you had a true freshman start, it was Micah Peavy. He did it. He was a spot starter at times, and I think it was kind of in and out of the starting lineup, his year. And it's just really hard in this league to be a true freshman, and to because the league is just too hard. There's older, grown men in this deal, and it's just game to game, it's brutal. I mean, it is a meat grinder, but. Pop is he's a big time shooter. He's an elite passer. I think he's kind of bought in defensively too. He's just really young, and so. But I'm going to be surprised if he's not a starter, in the opener, and then kind of going forward. I think that's what he's earned, and I think he's got that kind of talent. And so, interesting. And with that. The two guys that are also wild cards, kind of like Jalen Tyson, I don't know really what you're going to get here. Is Kerwin Walton and Demorian Williams, the Gardner-Webb transfer and the North Carolina transfer, because DeMaurian Williams is easily the most experienced player on your team, really, other than O'Banner. O'Banner is the most experienced, but because and he was just kind of good at everything. He didn't really, jack of all trades, master of none kind of thing. That's kind of who DeMaurian Williams is, but he can shoot it, he can defend, he can facilitate, he can do all these different things for you. And he's you can just tell he's older. He's built that way and all that. And then Kerwin Walton, guy played for a national championship finalist last year in North Carolina and played, I think, in every game. He was a 3-point specialist off the bench, and and he's going to get more minutes and an increased role for Mark Adams. And so, what does he do with it? In some ways, they are kind of like Jalen Tyson in that as they go, you'll go, because these are going to be like super subs. These are going to be guys that you count on off the bench to settle you down, to score for you, to kind of keep it going as you look to start a couple of freshmen, Jalen Tyson and Pop Isaacs.
Man, can't wait to find out which of these will begin to rise to the top, no doubt. And probably somebody we may not expect will begin to have an impact in a way we didn't anticipate. And we begin to find out this evening, depending on when you're watching this, if you're getting it fresh out of the oven because you're subscribed on YouTube.
That's
it's
right.
Tonight, baby, from United Supermarkets Arena. Chris will be on the call, of course, throughout the year, television and radio broadcasts. So catch him where you can, and we'll be back here to recap it all on Locked On Texas Tech. Chris, thanks for the time, man. Enjoy the opener.
Yes, sir. Appreciate it, Casey. Keep hope alive.
You got it. And subscribe on YouTube or anywhere you get podcasts so you never miss an episode of Locked On Texas Tech.